Welcome to DC Doom, where I watch every single movie from DC, every single television series based on DC characters. And today, unfortunately for us all, I'm going to review Superman 3, starring Christopher Reeve, Margot Kidder, Richard Pryor, and directed by Richard Lester. Now, Richard Lester, he directed the Superman 2, which I also didn't like, but I think watching the whole franchise, I realized something quite disappointing, which is in my opinion the first major Superman franchise ever to be filmed does not understand Superman's character at all. So in the second one, he brainwashes Lois, and he does that because his holographic mom told him that he can't be with a human. So in the third one, he decides that he's going to be with his like high school sweetheart, Lana Lang, and that's just a really weird progression of the story because Lana Lang is important, but she's the one that got away for Clark. If you want to know what I mean, go watch Smallville. But Lois is the person he's supposed to be with. And the reason they changed her role, she has a really small role, Lois Lane does in this movie. So the reason they changed it was twofold. One, the producers of this movie fired Richard Donner, and Richard Donner was directing the first two movies simultaneously. So they fired him from the second one, and they hired Richard Lester. And apparently, Gene Hackman, who played Lex Luthor, and Margot Kidder did not like this treatment of Richard Donner. And as punishment, the producers reduced the role of Lois Lane. And they said that the story had been played out. But the best part about this franchise is the relationship between Clark and Lois. That's the best part about this. There's other good things about the franchise, but to cut that out because you're pissed off because of political reasons, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah, and they said it was overplayed. Yeah, as I said, it just doesn't make any sense. And to show you what a train wreck garbage fire of a movie this is, Richard Pryor was on the Tonight Show and he said something like, I love the first two Superman movies. I would love to be in the sequel. And so they just offered him a major part in this movie. And I don't think that Richard Pryor does the job badly or anything. I just think tonally it doesn't make it doesn't capture kind of like the epic feel with a little bit of humor of the first two films. It just goes straight to slapstick. And in fact, the whole like maybe 5 minute opening sequence of the movie. So in the first movie, we had this like backstory with Marlon Brando about Krypton. It's very epic and stuff. The second movie, it starts a little less strongly by having a 5 minute recap of the first movie. And this movie is just basically a woman walks along and then she causes chaos. There's all of these slapstick things that are happening in Metropolis. And I thought maybe that the whole point of this slapstick thing was that, they were going to say that the woman is somewhat bad luck and Superman has to fight against bad luck and it's magic and that's one of Superman's weaknesses, which would be acceptable maybe, but it doesn't actually pay off. That's not really connected to the movie whatsoever. And then there are like really wild and crazy things like Richard Pryor, like the so well, let me get to the plot and then I will complain about some more specific things. So basically, what happens is Richard Pryor, he needs a job. He is really bad at everything. One day he does a computer course and he discovers he's really, really good at it. There's no explanation as to why he's really good at this computer. Yeah, so there's no explanation as to why he's really good at computers. He's just supernaturally good at computers. And he sits there, and his professor says, "How do you do that?" And he says, "I don't know." And I know that they were kind of trying to get at like Richard Pryor as comedic goofball, but why not just make him be able to understand computers? And it's something that he has a natural talent with, something that he understands, not just like, hey, it's all random, I don't know. Anyway, he gets a job at this company run by the Websters, who are like this really rich family. And he discovers, which is weird because he's an adult man who's almost 40 years old, I guess, that taxes exist and that the company is taking like a fraction of a cent from every employee and not giving it to the government because that wouldn't be worthwhile, and they're not actually keeping it. So he writes a program to get all of the money to himself. He steals $89,000 from his employers and goes to work the next day. Like, what? Why would you do that? That doesn't make any sense. Anyway, the Websters figure out what he's doing, and they want to use his computer skills for nefarious purposes, and they basically cause a weather disaster in Colombia because they want to corner the market in coffee. Meanwhile, back in Superman land and Clark land, Clark has this great idea of writing a story about how small towns have changed, and his editor in Metropolis thinks that this is a great idea. So he goes, and you think maybe like Lois is going to go with him, but no, she's off vacation. She literally has like 2 lines in this movie. It's so bad. And it's really bad that, you know, when they're actually interacting, they still have the clash and the charisma and everything, but it's basically like the movie's like, yeah, it's over. But we know deep in our hearts that that's not really over. That's the great love of each other's lives. But anyway, he goes back to Smallville, and there's another like really confusing scene where there's this kind of like chemical that could destroy the East Coast. That doesn't really pay off at all, but he is standing in the fire and he's got frozen breath. That's one of his powers. And he's just like, oh, he's like to the firefighter. He's like, you gotta put this out or this chemical factory's gonna blow up. And the firefighters are like, yeah, Superman, we know. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to put it out. But then somebody gets a great idea that there's a lake nearby, but there's not like a pipe that's far away. So he goes to the lake, he freezes some of the water from the lake, he picks it up, and then he drops it on the fire. But why didn't he think about that before? This is a Superman that is very without any sort of motivation or, I don't know, ambition or moxie. I don't know how to say it, but he's just he's very passive in this movie. So anyway, Superman, he ruins the plot to destroy the Colombian coffee harvest, and the Websters, it's like a brother and sister. They don't like that, so they figure out kryptonite again, and they have Richard Pryor's character. Forgot what the name of that character is. Not a great character. Anyway, they have him synthesize the kryptonite. But before this happens, there's a sequence where they have a little ski thing on top of their skyscraper for some reason. And Richard Pryor's character, he slowly goes down the ski slope up the kind of ramp, and there's a ramp there for whatever reason, and he goes off of the building, which, as I said before, is a skyscraper. He skis down the side of the building, like bumps off of something, and then lands without dying on the ground. And that is the point where this franchise jumps the shark, I think. Like, you can't really come back from that. Like, after I saw that, I was like, I don't really care what happens in this movie because that's just so stupid. I know you put it in for the chucks and the giggles, as it were, but it's not great. And the movie, unfortunately, continues, and they create this synthetic kryptonite, and they give it, so Richard Pryor's character pretends to be this general, because there's another plot where the Smallville gives like a parade for Superman, and Superman attends because he wants to be with Lana Lang now. Anyway, so Richard Pryor's character, pretending to be a general, gives Superman a hunk of kryptonite. And Superman knows what kryptonite looks like because that's what Lex Luthor put on him in the first movie. So he forgot what happened like maybe 6 months ago. I don't know. Really, really weird. So anyway, he doesn't remember what kryptonite looks like, but it doesn't have an immediate effect. It doesn't kill him. But the synthetic kryptonite kind of works like red kryptonite would in the comics, so it turns Superman kind of evil. And there is one moment where he is evil. He's kind of like trying to hit on Lana Lang, and he should be rescuing some people. And I mean, he goes, and I think that the people die, actually. So a pretty serious thing. But the movie goes right on. And then it shows that Superman isn't bad. He's just mischievous. He straightens the Leaning Tower of Pisa. He blows out the Olympic flame. It's that kind of level of thing. And then there's like a fight between Clark and evil Superman. I don't know how that happens, but they're fighting, and Clark wins, and then he's like a good guy again. And there's like some good moments where Ricky, Lana Lang's son, says something like, "Oh, Superman, you're just in a slump. We believe in you. You'll be better." And so that's kind of like, I think in a better movie that would have been a nice moment, but this is really, really bad movie. And there are some wild things in the movie that are enjoyable for the first maybe 40 minutes. But after that, honestly, I was falling asleep. There's a bit where a woman turns into a cyborg thing because they create this really intense, powerful computer. I don't know. Blah, 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 blah. It's bad. It's the worst Superman movie I've seen so far. I have seen the Snyder, Man of Steel. And I think that doesn't understand who Superman is in a different way. But I think that, what's his name? Zack Snyder, yeah. I think Zack Snyder at least is a competent filmmaker. So when you watch those movies, you feel like, yeah, I'm watching a movie about a superhero. We can argue with if it's good or not, but this does not understand Superman at all, and it kind of makes the whole thing into a comedy for some reason, and it's just so bad. And apparently the writers of this film were hired to do the second two films as well, but Richard Donner, again, the guy who was fired from the second film, he said, no, we need to do a lot of rewrites because this isn't good. And they ended up making a great film with the first one. It's a really odd film, a kind of a bizarre film, but you know what Superman is about. And the second one, I think it's not great. As I said, it doesn't understand the character of Superman. The ending really lets it down, but it does have a lot of great moments between Clark and Lois, which are wonderful to watch. This film, I really find it hard to say anything positive about it. You know, the only positive is that Richard Pryor does a good job, but Richard Pryor shouldn't be in the movie. So yeah, what did you think about the movie? I'm trying to get to be the most prolific reviewer of all time, so I review a lot of different things. I'm trying to get to 20 subscribers by the end of June. Currently, we're at 15, so if you like what I do, please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, all of that stuff. All right, thanks. Bye-bye.